All right, the clock up here says it is 9 o'clock, which means it is 9:02 on my AT&T phone back in the back. So we'll go ahead and get started. Prayer list. Any updates, Barbara? Okay. So Charles and Shirley Oates. I guess there are a lot of people in the Midwest, and we need to remember all the way from northern Illinois to Texas and Oklahoma, who were experiencing some really big tornadoes over the last couple of days. See a lot of pictures that look like this area from 2.5 years ago. So. Anybody else? I didn't look at my bulletin this morning. I had it, but I didn't glance through it. I guess Linda Winstead's still on the mend from her fall. Anybody else? Tammy, you feeling okay? All right, if nothing else, Pete, if you will start us with prayer. All right, thank you much, Pete. All right, hey, we're into chapter 3. We have actually moved into chapter 3 now. And as we're continuing sort of this section of it, talking about a new direction, and we'll start with Mark chapter 3, verse 1 today. We started a little bit of this, but time ran out on us last week. So we'll start with Mark 3, and we'll look first of all today at verses 1 through 6. Mark 3, 1 through 6. It says, Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a shriveled hand. In order to accuse him, they were watching him closely to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath. He told the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand before us." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. After looking around at them with anger, he was grieved at the hardness of their hearts and told the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Immediately the Pharisees went out and started plotting with the Herodians against him, how they might kill him. It's only 6 verses, but there's a lot in these 6 verses. There's a lot of what we would call plot line in the overall story of these 6 verses. But surprisingly, there's a whole lot in here. Now, we're not told what town he is in here in this section. Many assume he's still in Capernaum, but there's no distinct pointing out by Mark where he's at. Now, interesting note, why were the scribes, Pharisees here at this point? They're not here looking to see if he will just heal somebody. What are they trying to do? The text tells us. Looking to see if he will heal, but looking to see if he will heal what? On a Sabbath. Because at this point, they've seen enough. They know that he can heal. They knew that Jesus can work miracles. And yet they're more concerned with, is he going to adhere to the law? Which again shows us just how misled they were, or how misconceived they were about what the law was intended to do. But they're looking to see if Jesus is going to do something on the Sabbath. You know, he's already claimed, as we looked at over the last couple of weeks, to be Lord of the Sabbath. Caused a little bit of trouble. So now they're going to see if he will work, he will heal on the Sabbath. And they're looking to see if he will heal so they might accuse him. Does this say a lot about the hearts of them? They're not happy or pleased that someone who is disabled or that was handicapped will be healed. Doesn't matter to them. They're not happy with the miracles he's done, the people's lives he improved, the people's lives he has changed. They want to see if he's going to do something where they can accuse him of breaking the law. Yeah. He didn't touch him. He didn't spoke to him. We're going to get to another point here interesting about this situation too. But they're looking just to accuse Jesus of something. They don't care if somebody's lives made better. They don't care if somebody's physically healed or spiritually healed. They're looking for something that they can get Jesus in trouble with. They want to accuse him. The Pharisees now initially were amazed by Jesus' teaching. Then they questioned. Now we're just straight up, they're against him. They're against him. They thought his teaching was interesting. The healings, the miracles, all of that was wonderful. And now we've gone to the point, wow, why do you think there's such animosity at this point? It seems like it'd be a good thing if people are getting healed, people are changing their lives, people are living better. Yet they're not happy about that. Why? Their authority is being questioned. Now, essentially what Jesus said is what we looked at last week. What did he essentially say about who has ultimate authority? He does. And what he said essentially, and when he says that, he says, I am God in flesh. Which means the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of the day, their authority's gone. They no longer have any authority because God is here. Oh, now we don't have power. Now we don't have status. They weren't so much worried about, they had gotten so to the point, they weren't worried about faith or religion. They were worried about maintaining their position and their piety, their appearance. And now they are out to get Jesus. They're there simply to see if there's some way they can trap him. You look at verse 5 in the English Standard Version, it says, and he looked around them in anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Jesus' anger here stems from what? Their lack of compassion. Not that they were trying to adhere to what they perceived the law was. It was their utter lack of compassion. I think there's a message there for us too. We need to not get caught up in legalism and religiosity to the point that we become people with a lack of compassion. And here it says Jesus' anger is because they don't care about this man. They simply do not care about him. We don't need to get to the point as Christians that we don't care about others, that we don't need to get as Christians to the point that we're worrying about towing the law and the line so tightly that we forget to be compassionate towards others, that we forget to express love towards others. Jesus' anger is over their complete and utter lack of compassion. This moment was what the Sabbath was all about, setting people free. Jesus is going to set this man free of his infirmity with his withered hand. They don't see that part of it. They only see that, oh, look at this. If you stay to the letter of the law, what he's doing is wrong. And even then, they're misreading the letter of the law. Now, there is something different in this situation than many of the previous healings that Mark has written about. What's different here? He didn't ask. This man was not one of those who came to Jesus and said, Lord, I know that you can. Please heal me, or I know that you can if you will. This guy doesn't say anything. Do we know that this guy even had faith in Jesus? Mark doesn't tell us that, does he? We don't know about this man and his faith and his position and his strength. And he's not asking to be healed. He's there, but he's not asking. This really, what this comes down to is a confrontational moment where Jesus is picking, to me, this is a confrontational moment where Jesus is choosing, here's where we're going to make a stand. And here's where I'm going to show you who I am, and what authority I have. I've been showing you this all along, but here's the line. But this man doesn't ask. The man does not ask to be healed. I'm sure he was happy, but he didn't come seeking. He was there, but Jesus selected him to heal him. One writer said the arrival of Jesus and his kingdom is the rescuing of people, bringing light into darkness and hope to the hopeless. The arrival of his kingdom is help, hope, and healing. It is what the Sabbath was supposed to be all about. They are so hard in their hearts that they do not understand the meaning of the Sabbath and the meaning of what Jesus is doing. All they can see is the law and the rules surrounding their laws. It's not just the law, it's the things that they have added to the law. The man-made additions to what was handed down. But that's all they can see. All right, let's bring this forward 2,000 plus years, 2,100 years. Do we ever find Christians in these situations today? Do we ever find us acting this way, where we're so worried about towing the line on the law and doing the things we believe are right and not doing the things that we're doing, not doing the things that are wrong, that we lose track of having love and compassion for others? And the greatest of these is what? The greatest is love. Not how well you can recite the law or the scripture, not how well you adhere to it. The greatest is love. And these men, these religious leaders are so caught up in adhering to the law and the additions they've made to the law, they have no compassion. One, we don't need to be making any additions to what Jesus has laid out for us. And two is we need to understand what Jesus was about loving others, taking care of others, and following him. We do not need to lose our compassion by getting caught up in our religiosity. They're so caught up in their legalism that they exhibit no caring for the man who's suffering. The only thing they're concerned about in this whole situation is using this situation to trap Jesus. It doesn't say, oh, they celebrated momentarily for the man that was healed, but then, Jesus, you did this on the Sabbath. The only thing they were worried about was Jesus breaking the Sabbath. There was no compassion for that man. None. The Pharisees here do not doubt Jesus' ability to heal the man. Think about this setting. They've seen him. They've followed him. You know they've had their powwows, their confabs where they've gathered. They've talked about Jesus and the healing he's doing. They don't doubt that he can heal him. Doesn't say they were there to see if he could heal him. They were there to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. They didn't doubt that Jesus could heal him. At this point, they've seen it. Another writer said they fully accept his miraculous power, but they have no desire to contemplate who Jesus is. and where his power comes from. For them, all that matters is Jesus' use of power in ways contrary to their man-made laws and how it threatens their authority. That's the ultimate thing for them. This is going to overturn where they've been. All that matters is how it threatens them. They don't care to think, well, wow, he's doing all this. Who is he? It's just, he's going to overturn things. Jesus is not him. What this tells us is that Jesus is not simply here to patch up the old system. He's not coming in to fix Judaism and the law, just to patch it here and patch it there and do a little tweak here, a little tweak there. He's here to bring in a whole new way of life with a whole new hope. And again, this is part of the problem they're having. This is going to be a complete overturn, upheaval of what they have done for hundreds and thousands of years. But it was prophesied. They should have been able to see it in the prophecy. They didn't, because they had become more concerned with upholding their man-made regulations. After God gave Moses the written law defining how Israel was to interact with God, scribes developed and added a huge list of oral laws meant to further define what it meant to obey God. God said, here are my rules, here are my guidelines. And man is going, well, to not even get close to that, we're going to say you have to do this. Then over time, well, to not even get close to that, you have to say this. This is why the law became a yoke and a burden, as man added so much more to what God intended that it became a problem. Again, today, do we ever do this? Do we ever add things from a man-made point that God never intended to be in place? And the answer is oftentimes yes. Oftentimes man has said, well, God said this, but that must mean that we're going to do this. We've added things. And sometimes we make Christianity more a burden that it shouldn't be. But Jesus challenged the Pharisees' supposed piety. He reminds them the Sabbath is intended for good, not just personal discipline. He's telling them, you guys are missing the purpose here. You guys are missing the reason. Jesus exposes their narrow thinking, trying to draw them into a larger view. Is it okay to do good on the Sabbath? And they're looking at it going, nope, can't do that. Can't do nothing on the Sabbath. And again, an utter lack of compassion. Is the Sabbath meant for good or harm? He asked them. Now, it's an interesting sort of trap question for them. If they say it's meant for good, Jesus goes, I'm doing good. And they're not going to say it's meant for harm. He's got them cornered here. Got them cornered. Look at verse 6. A little bit here. Back at verse 6, it says, immediately the Pharisees went out and started plotting with the Herodians against him, how they might kill him. Interesting little position here. Charles Dudley Warner said, politics make strange bedfellows. We are now in one of those situations that the religious leaders are going out with the Herodians. Say, hey, let's work together. Are these people that would normally do anything together? The Herodians' alliance with the Pharisees is interesting because philosophically, they got nothing in common. Nothing. The Pharisees concentrate on obeying the Mosaic law in hopes the Messiah will arrive and free Israel from Rome. The Herodians have absolutely no formal connection to the temple or religion. Their primary concern and loyalty is to the king and Rome's rule over Israel. So here are people who want to get rid of Rome, now going to decide that they're going to work with part of the Roman structure to help get rid of Jesus. And actually, in a roundabout way, what are they wanting Rome to do? You ever heard the old adage, the old line, somebody to do your dirty work for you? Isn't that what the religious leaders here are looking for? I think there's one reason they want to do that is if Jesus' following gets big enough, the religious leaders can look at the Romans and point to them and say, well, they're the ones that took care of him. They're the ones that took him out, not us. They're actually looking for somebody to do their dirty work, so they're partnering up with people they would normally want to be getting rid of. We haven't changed a lot in 2,000 years, have we? You don't have to look very far around us to see people in the Christian world partnering up with people that they normally wouldn't have anything to do with to get to their power motives, their political motives, their financial motives. And here we see it again. Here we see that the religious leaders are going to partner with people they really don't want to have anything to do with. The Pharisees will ultimately work toward getting the Herodians to do their dirty work for them. We want to get rid of Jesus. Hey, they have the means. They can do that. They can help get the execution done. Let's let them handle it. We'll work with them and get along with them for the purpose of getting done here what we want to get done. So that's where we are at this point as we get the end of verse 6. The religious leaders are looking at, we got to do something. Now we're going to work with people that we don't see eye to eye with, but they can help us get done what we want to get done. All right, as we get into the next section, Mark 7, verse 35, we're going to talk a little bit about who will follow Jesus. Who will become his followers. The religious leaders at this point are challenging Jesus and have now formally rejected him. They're not going to follow him. So who will follow him at this point? And they're also now taking counsel on how to get rid of him. So now let's look at Mark 7 and then go through verse 12. Mark 7 through verse 12. It said, Jesus departed with his disciples to the sea, and a large crowd followed from Galilee, and a large crowd followed from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, and around Tyre and Sidon. The large crowd came to him because they had heard about everything he was doing. Then he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him so that the crowd wouldn't crush him. Since he had healed many, all who had diseases were pressing toward him to touch him. Whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he would strongly warn them not to make him known. So here again, we've got a crowd situation. Word continues to get out. And we're going to look a little bit at Jesus' authority again. Even as the religious leaders are trying to figure out a way to get rid of him, what's his following continue to do? Grow. More people are following. The crowds are getting larger. It's making it more difficult in some instances, but the crowds are growing, which I'm sure provides a little additional motivation to the religious leaders of, this has got to get moving. We've got to do something. Jackson Lucas, I see a mouse moving. Okay. So, crowds. Again, we've talked about the crowds that are following Jesus. The crowds are getting big. They're following him everywhere. And the crowds are making it more difficult for him to do what he wants to do. So he tells them, a friend of him, get me a boat so I can get out on the water. Gets him a little bit more room. The crowds are on the shore. And it gets Jesus away where he can do it, and the crowds are not crushing in on him. Not physically presenting a threat toward him, just simply from a crowd standpoint. So people with diseases, it says, are pressing in, trying to touch Jesus so they can be healed. We see this in other places. But these people have seen Jesus, they know what he can do, and they're all saying, if I can just touch him, if I can just lay a finger on him, if I can just put my hand on his shoulder, something's going to happen for me. And then whenever an unclean spirit sees Jesus, they bow and confess that Jesus is the Son of God, but we're back in the situation. Jesus doesn't want the unclean spirits to be the ones to testify to who he is. Great crowds are seeing his authority and coming to him. People are seeing this. They understand that this is something special, and they're coming. Great crowds are coming. But, again, the religious leaders are not recognizing his authority anymore at this point. He's a threat to their authority, and they're not seeing his authority. They don't care about all the good things that he's doing, the healings and all of that. They just see him as a threat to their status. Because if you were concerned about the people who were sick, the people that had conditions, the people that were crippled, the people that have all those problems, if you were concerned about those, you'd be saying, hey, Jesus, way to go. You're taking care of all these people that we've not been able to do anything for, and you're healing them. If they were actually concerned about the people they should have been concerned about, both their physical needs and spiritual needs, the religious leaders of that day would have seen all this going on and thought, this is cool as all get out. But they didn't, did they? All they can see, all they can feel, this is going to be a problem for us because he's going to be now, if he's got that much authority, we're not going to have any. My status, my power, my political affluence is all gone if Jesus is who he said he is. So we got to get rid of him. The religious leaders are looking at two problems from their view. One, his influence threatens their social positions. Because the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees of that day, they were at the upper end of the social status, weren't they? People looked up to them. They had affluence. A lot of them had money because of their status. So Jesus threatens all of this. And Jesus' fame could bring, here's a serious one they're also thinking about. Jesus' fame could bring military repercussions from Rome. If he turns out to be not really the Messiah, but if he turns out to be a political revolutionary, Rome's going to come in here. And the problem with Rome coming in is what? Rome's going to calm the situation down. They don't care who's responsible, but they're going to come in how? They're going to come in strong. They're going to come in physically. They're not going to care who they hurt. They're not going to care who they kill. They are the most powerful empire in the world at this point. All they're wanting to do is not have trouble off in this little place in the Middle East. They'll send in legions and they will tamp down any revolution. And those who are in status and leadership places at that point won't be there long. Because Rome will replace them. Rome will get rid of them. Rome just wants the tax revenue coming in while we're off conquering the rest of the world. Verse 9. Look back at verse 9 a minute. Interestingly though here, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him so that the crowd wouldn't crush him. Jesus told them, be ready. I think a point to us here that we can take from this verse is he wants us to be ready. Now, he may not be preparing a boat for somebody, for Tim to go out and preach from the lake, but he wants us to be ready to do what needs to be done. Jesus says, hey, we've got to deal with these crowds. You guys have a boat ready for me to get on to pull out from shore so I can preach from the boat. He wanted them to make preparations for his arrival. Gee, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing anyway, now? Aren't we supposed to be making preparations for his return, his arrival? That's what we as Christians, one of our primary goals, one of our primary responsibilities is to be preparing ourselves and be preparing others for his arrival. So here in this verse 9 in Mark chapter 3, he's telling, prepare for what I need to do. Prepare for me coming. We should prepare too. We should be willing to prepare and be ready. At this point, 4 of Jesus' disciples are fishermen, and Jesus uses their strength and resources for his ministry. Hey, I got guys who know how to handle a boat. So he tells them, our responsibilities, our preparation for his arrival, each one of us has different strengths and abilities. And what Jesus wants us to do is to use our strengths and our abilities to do what we can to prepare for his arrival. Tammy, you have different skills than I do. Troy, you have different skills from Tammy. Pete has different skills from Troy. But we all have something we can do for the cause of the kingdom. We all have something that we can do to prepare for his arrival. Prepare. He wants us to prepare. We should have that same attentiveness, preparedness, and willingness. Okay? Question. Do we? Are we always attentive to things that we can do to help the kingdom? Are we always prepared to do what we have the ability and the means to do? Or are we unprepared and miss opportunities? And are we willing? Let's put a tough spot for Christians here. Are we always willing to do what we ought to do? Or sometimes, sadly, are Christians not quite willing to do the things they might need to do? I bet it's sad to say that more often than it should be, we're not willing. We're not willing to pay the price or pay the cost or do what needs to be done to make the sacrifice what needs to be done. At any moment, God may call to use our talents, our homes, our jobs, and yes, our money in his plan to reach people. We never know when that might happen, do we? We never know when something might be pointed our way, and it's our calling to help it, to help in that cause. Mark 3:12 in the NET, it reads a little different. Has anybody got the NET? I didn't bring my phone up. But it's a little bit different, because if you look at verse 12 here, as he's talking about the demons, he says, and he would strongly warn them. And NET is going to be digital. And I forgot to bring my phone up. The word in the NET in Mark 3:12 is stronger than warn them. Basically, the NET says he would command them not to identify him. You got it? What does the NET? It uses... Yeah, I like that version of it better, because I have the contemporary Christian Standard Bible, and it says, it uses the word, he warned them. That's like, don't do it, or. But the NET is basically, he said, no. He commanded them, he restricted them from saying who he was. I don't think in that case Jesus is just warning them. He is commanding. With his authority over all, he commands these demons, you cannot say who I am. I don't think, because we warn our kids, you do this, or if you do that, you're gonna. I don't think that's what Jesus is doing here. He is, by his authority, restricting those demons from saying who he is. 3 possible reasons here that Jesus does not allow the demons to announce who he is. And we talked a little bit about this previously. But 3 possible reasons. 1, time's not right. Time is not right. Jesus and his mother had that conversation little. Not my time. The time is not right. 2, if demons are allowed to testify about who he is, and it is believed, what happens when demons lie about Jesus? Think about that a minute. That one had never hit me until I came across this commentary on this. If the demons are the ones who are allowed to testify who Jesus is and acknowledge he is the Son of God, and people believe what has been said, then what happens when Satan's demons then lie? What will people do? Would they not believe them in their lie? If you allow the demons to be the ones to authenticate, it's going to be hard to take that authentication back when they say something that's untrue. So you can't have the demons being the one to announce, he's the Son of God. Because later on, if people hear that and believe that from the demons, if they say, yeah, but he's horrible, then how do you tell them, well, now they're lying? Well, were they lying earlier? Or maybe 3. Jesus wants his followers to be the ones to bear witness to who he is. Now, has anything changed over 2,100 years? He still wants us to be the ones to bear witness to who he is. By our words, by our actions, by our deeds, we are to bear witness to who he is. Now, the problem is sometimes we bear witness to things that are not very Christ-like. But he wants us to be the ones to bear witness to who he is. All right, let's go on to beginning of verse 13. Verse 13, we've got about 5-6 minutes. Jesus went up the mountain and summoned those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, to be with him, to send them out to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. He appointed the 12. To Simon he gave the name Peter, and to James the son of Zebedee, and to his brother John he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, and Bartholomew, Matthew, and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. So Jesus now appoints his apostles. Another further development in the ministry. This is a pivotal moment in the book of Mark, because now it's not just Jesus teaching and healing. He's going to send out others with his message. They're not just going to be the ones who are trailing him now. They're the ones who are going to be out and doing things as well. So now we have an expansion of his cause. 12. Number 12. Why did Jesus pick 12? Why not 8, 14, 26? Why 12? Anybody? From a numerologic standpoint, 12 is an important biblical number. Number of tribes. Why 12? Well, the 12 disciples parallel the 12 tribes of Israel. We talked about, the original nation of Israel, 12 tribes. Now we talk about the new Israel, the church, and it's going to start with 12 followers, 12 apostles. The number 12 stands for one of the most prominent numbers. It's one of the most prominent numbers in the Bible. The number 12 is, get this, used in 187 places. Choked up. Number 12 is used in 187 places in the Bible. The number 12 typically means perfection or authority, often used as the context of government, in the context of a government. In Revelation, the New Jerusalem, which descends out of heaven, has 12 gates made of pearl, which are manned by 12 angels. Each of the gates has been named after one of the 12 tribes of Israel. 12, 12, 12. In the Old Testament tabernacle, the priests were to place 12 unleavened cakes. In Leviticus 24:5. In Matthew 14:19, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up how many basketfuls of broken pieces? 12. 12 basketfuls. When the Israelites wandered in the desert after they fled Egypt, they had how many spies go to scout out the promised land? 12. When Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that is interpreted that he will act like a wild beast for a while, the dream ends up being fulfilled 12 months later. Daniel 4. Completion, perfection, a perfect period of time. One writer said the Israelites were divided into 12 tribes, and as Jesus calls out a new people for himself, he starts with 12 men who will form the basis of the new Israel. Isaiah 49:6, he says, "It's too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." The 12 tribes originally were for Israel. The new 12 are for everyone. This is the foundation of everything, the basis and the expansion of the church. And we're at 9:43, no time to get into anything else, but 12, a number of perfection. Anybody got anything? We got about 2 minutes. Not enough time to go any further. Again, we've seen Jesus reestablishing his authority, and now we have the religious leaders willing to work with people who are not good people to get done what they want to get done. And now we're starting to see who the followers of Jesus will be, and we'll get into next week, in addition to who the followers will be, who they are not going to be. As the dividing lines are starting to get drawn here and the separation is beginning to take place. And Mark's getting to his points each and every chapter. And we will stop right there for this week.